It was a sparkling night in Monaco, the kind of night when chandeliers glittered brighter than stars and whispers traveled faster than wind. Underneath the marble arches of the famed Hôtel de Paris, Europe's elites mingled carelessly, their laughter echoing softly into the golden halls. But among them stood one man who did not laugh, who did not sip champagne carelessly. Instead, he watched, carefully, silently, like a lion measuring shadows. That man was Ibrahim Traoré, President of Burkina Faso. But he wasn't here tonight to enjoy the luxuries of Europe. He was here to deliver a speech at the International Leadership Gala, a stage usually dominated by European politicians and billionaire philanthropists. They had invited Traoré as a courtesy, never expecting him to accept. But Traoré had come because he knew something else. He knew that in rooms filled with soft music and polished silverware, decisions were often made about Africa without Africans at the table. Tonight, however, someone else had been watching him closely, someone beautiful, dangerous, and completely unexpected. Across the ballroom, standing near a pillar wrapped in golden curtains, was Camille Laurent, a French fashion model known across Europe for her elegance and charm. She moved gracefully, her silk dress shimmering softly under the lights. To everyone else, Camille was there as a celebrity guest, smiling at the cameras, mingling effortlessly. But behind her sparkling eyes, Camille hid a darker secret, a mission handed down from powerful figures in shadowy rooms. Camille Laurent wasn't just a model. She was a spy. She had arrived in Monaco 3 days earlier, briefed extensively by men who spoke quietly, urgently, in a hidden office in Paris. They wanted information about Traoré, his conversations, his plans, his alliances. They had grown anxious ever since Traoré expelled French troops and foreign mining companies from Burkina Faso, a move seen as bold, even dangerous, by Western elites. "Make him trust you," they told her. "Make him comfortable. Then bring us his secrets." And Camille, ever confident, promised them softly, "Consider it done." Camille moved slowly through the gala, weaving between dignitaries with practiced ease. Her mission was simple: capture President Traoré's trust and extract sensitive information quietly, subtly. At 9:15 p.m., President Traoré stepped away from the main table after delivering a speech that had left the entire room quiet with surprise. He spoke not of charity, but of justice, of Africa's independence from foreign control. As he moved toward the balcony for fresh air, Camille saw her opportunity. She followed, her steps light, her voice carefully gentle. "Your speech was powerful," she said softly, her French perfect. Traoré turned slowly to look at her. He nodded politely. "I only spoke the truth," he replied calmly, his voice steady, but his eyes sharp, alert. Camille smiled faintly, her eyes holding his gaze just long enough. "I admire leaders who speak truth in rooms filled with lies." Traoré watched her silently. He was not easily charmed, but he also was polite. "Thank you," he finally said. From that moment, Camille stayed close, but never suspiciously so. She laughed softly at his rare jokes, nodded respectfully at his insightful observations, always close, but never pressing. Yet every move she made was carefully calculated. Her subtle gestures, her quick glances, the soft laugh that made others trust her instantly. But President Traoré was no ordinary politician. Beneath his calm exterior, he knew too well that trust was the most dangerous weapon of all. Throughout the evening, something kept pulling at his instincts. Camille was too careful, too precise, too interested in conversations just out of her hearing range. His suspicions were confirmed just minutes later. Standing near the fountain, a loyal security officer, disguised as a guest, whispered into his earpiece, "Sir, we intercepted a transmission. Someone inside this gala is transmitting audio. You're being recorded." Traoré's expression did not change. He continued to smile at passing guests. "Find who it is," he whispered softly. His guard responded calmly, "We already traced the signal, sir. It's coming from the woman you've been speaking with, the French model, Camille Laurent." Traoré glanced across the room. Camille was smiling, laughing gently with another guest. She looked harmless, even radiant, yet she had betrayed herself. "Good," Traoré said quietly, thoughtfully. "Let her continue. Tonight, we'll teach them a lesson they won't forget." The next few minutes were a blur of laughter, clinking glasses, and softly exchanged words. But for Ibrahim Traoré, each second that passed felt like an eternity, as though he were walking through a silent storm, where every glance and gesture from Camille had already been processed and understood. As the gala continued, Traoré made his way to the bar to get a drink. Camille, ever the professional, followed, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor. "Another drink, President Traoré?" she asked, her voice laced with casual flirtation. "Yes, please," Traoré said, his eyes never leaving hers. But inside, his mind was already racing, calculating the next steps. He had no intention of letting this spy get away without a lesson that would echo long after the night was over. When the drinks arrived, Traoré took his time, savoring the moment. Camille was too focused on her mission to notice the slight change in his demeanor. But as she raised her glass, Traoré's voice, low but firm, stopped her. "Tell me, Camille," he said, his gaze steady. "What do you see when you look at me?" Her lips curled into a smile. "I see a man of great power, a man who could change the world." Traoré smiled faintly, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Is that all?" he asked. Camille raised an eyebrow. "What else could there be?" "That," Traoré said, leaning in just slightly, his voice almost a whisper, "is where you're wrong." Before she could respond, Traoré turned away, his fingers brushing the edge of the bar. A signal. His guards stepped forward, each in position, silently locking down the room. The sound of Camille's breath caught in her throat, but she quickly masked it with another smile. But this time, Traoré saw through it. His security detail had already made their move. While Camille had been so focused on the president, her every word and movement had been recorded. Her phone, tucked beneath her dress, had been silently seized without her even realizing it. They had everything, all the evidence they needed. The trap was set. At precisely 10:45 p.m., Traoré made his move. He stood tall and walked to the center of the ballroom, his steps purposeful, his gaze unwavering. Silence fell over the crowd as his voice rang out across the space. "Ladies and gentlemen," Traoré said, his voice commanding yet calm, "I have come to teach you a lesson about loyalty and respect." The murmurs spread like wildfire as every eye turned toward him. "I am not like the others you may have met in these halls," he continued, his voice steady but sharp. "I do not hide behind the walls of wealth or the masks of false friendships. I stand here as the leader of my people, as one who holds the truth in my hands." He paused for a moment, his eyes scanning the room. And then he turned toward Camille Laurent, who stood frozen near the pillar, her heart pounding in her chest. "Camille!" Traoré called, his voice sharp. "You have been spying on me. You thought you could deceive me, but you underestimated the power of truth. You thought you could take from me, but instead, it is you who will give." The room went silent as Camille's face drained of color. She took a half step back, but it was too late. The security team had already ushered her forward, and in the blink of an eye, the footage began to play on the screens surrounding the room. Every conversation, every whispered word, every moment she had tried to steal from him was exposed. The crowd gasped as Camille's secret mission was laid bare for all to see. The foreign agents who had sent her, the coded messages she had been sending back to Paris, and the betrayal she had woven through the threads of her charm, all of it was displayed in crystal-clear clarity. But Traoré wasn't finished. "As you can see," he said, his tone cold, "this woman, whom you all welcomed with open arms, was nothing more than a puppet in the hands of those who believe Africa is theirs to control. There was a long, pregnant silence. Then, without a word, Traoré turned to Camille one final time. "You see, Camille, you thought you were clever. But cleverness is no match for loyalty, and loyalty is what I stand for. Tonight, I return the favor you've given me." With a final nod to his security detail, Traoré left the room, his presence still lingering as the screen behind him flickered one last time, showing the final image of Camille, the face of a woman whose arrogance had led her to underestimate the power of a man who would not be manipulated. The entire room stood still. No one dared to speak. As the footage was broadcast across the country, Traoré's message rang louder than any speech ever could. Africa was awake. Africa was in charge. And as the cameras rolled, one final message appeared across the screen. Respect Africa or face the consequences.